Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's session of Solid Finances. We'll go ahead and get started by thanking our sponsors, Montana State University Extension and North Dakota State University Extension. They provide the web or the formatting, the web format and website that brings this series to you every week. Our website, the address is here on the screen for you. On this website, you can find our upcoming schedule, contact information. So if you have any questions after a session, we'd like to hear from you. We will get back to you in a short period of time. If you're looking for recordings of past sessions that you may have missed, you can find those on our website along with any resources that we address in our live presentations. Some interactive tools that we have available during today's presentation. At the bottom of your screen, you see a Q&A box. You can type in questions there, and it will remain completely anonymous. The only people that can see those are those of us running the webinar today. And then throughout the presentation, we will have some poll questions for you to answer as we go. Some upcoming sessions. These are the last 3 sessions in the series for are these the last 3? They are. For 2019-2020, March 4th, 11th, and March 25th, which is a date change. Those 3 are going to be presented by Dr. Marcia Getting from Montana State University Extension, and she will be discussing some estate planning issues and some decision making. So with that, today I would like to introduce Michelle Grocke and Joel Schumacher, both from MSU Extension. I'm sorry, I think it was Grocke. Finances and Stress, Causes, Biological Impacts, and Management Tools. So Joel, if you'd like to.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Appreciate the introduction there. Yeah, today's going to be a little bit different than some of the sessions we've done in the past. First of all, we're able to incorporate a new presenter to the series, so you'll hear from Michelle after I kind of get things started here today. But we're going to talk a little bit kind of about the interaction between finances and stress. I think probably in general, many people have sort of heard that financial issues cause stress, whether that be due to like a recession that we see nationally, or credit card debt, or student loan debt, or job loss, or something along those lines. But now we're going to talk a little bit about some of those causes, but then Michelle's going to talk about some different strategies and things we can do to manage those two things together. All right, well, first, let's start with a poll question. I'd love to hear a little bit about you, and we're going to ask for some participation here. So what level of stress do financial concerns cause you? And we'll go ahead and say currently with this, because it certainly could have been different a year ago or 5 years ago. All right, so everybody's saying at least some stress, but most saying just a little bit of stress. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you're not in the high stress region. I'm guessing you're probably not the only ones that have some stress there. The National Financial Capability Study, which is put together by the FINRA Foundation, put some different reports out, and I just want to kind of put a couple things in context. About 53% of the respondents to that said that just thinking about their finances made them anxious. And another 44% said just discussing their finances is stressful. So certainly I think there's a lot of evidence out there that certainly finances and stress have a pretty direct link between the two. Now, that same study also kind of highlights it's not necessarily equal stress among all Americans, and I didn't want to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but certainly 18 to 34-year-olds report the highest levels of stress, and maybe that's not surprising because they're probably just starting careers, probably at the lower end of the pay scale, may not have financial reserves or a net worth built up like some older individuals might. So certainly the younger folks experience this stress and finance link a little more. than some other age groups. And then also between male and female, first of all, across the board, females were more likely to feel anxious or stressed about finances, but particularly single females. So again, depending on kind of where you fall in the demographics, your category sort of may have more stress just generally associated with it than some other demographic groups. So I'm going to ask you one more question here. Specifically, what kind of financial issues have caused you stress in the past? So maybe not currently, but at some point in the past. So. All right, so we're starting to get some answers in, and we're hearing house buying, caring for a parent, lack of money and ability to obtain enough money, credit cards, student loans. Yeah, certainly, I would say a whole bunch of these. And we've got determining if I'm saving enough for retirement. Sure. Not knowing about inflation in the future, car payments. Yeah. Lots of different topics. None of these surprise me, and we could probably go on. And I'm sure if I told you to all list your top 3 things, you'd probably have several more that you could share with everybody as well. Now, Solid Finances, we've been doing this for 10 years, and kind of the general tone of all of the sessions in the past has been, we're going to pick a particular area of personal finance, and we're going to provide education to help you feel more comfortable making informed decisions about that. So whether that was student loans, we've done one on home buying, we've done ones on credit cards, we've done things on refinancing, we've done things on insurance and the financial risk associated with those things. We've done things on budgeting. We've done things on estate planning. So these are all probably in that previous slide, could have been on that list of things that might be causing stress in your life. And the tact we've taken in the past is, if we give you more education, you'll be able to make better decisions in this area. And then hopefully reduce the potential stress from that particular area. One thing I think we haven't done as well is, let's just say that we have too much credit card debt, and we're on a plan and we're going to reduce that credit card debt over, let's just say, 24 months. We still may have a considerable amount of financial stress because of the status of our credit card debt, even if we're on a new plan that's going to get us to where we want to be in 24 months. Or we heard someone suggest that retirement savings was a potential for a cause of stress. And again, let's say that you've calculated how much you need and you think you don't currently have enough, and you create a plan that's going to help you save over the next 10, 20 years to get to enough. Between now and then, we may still have a lot of stress we have to deal with because of this underlying financial issue. So what we're going to do today is we're going to invite someone with a whole lot more expertise than I have about some ways that we can manage stress, knowing that even if we've learned the right tact, we're going to make the right decisions going forward, there still could be some financial stress, both periodically and sort of as we get ourselves on a plan to achieve whatever those goals are that we set. So I'm really excited today to have Michelle join us to kind of identify and address this issue that really I think this series hasn't covered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Grokey, who's our MSU Extension Wellness Specialist. So with that, Michelle, I'll turn it over to you, and I would encourage folks to please send questions, comments in that question and answer pod at the bottom, and we'll try to incorporate those. So with that, it's all yours, Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel, and thank you, Carrie, as well, for the introduction earlier. And thank you to all of you for joining us today on your lunch break. So we just spent a little bit of time, or Joel shared with us some statistics about the relationship between finances and stress, and thank you for your participation there as well. But before I go into presenting a few stress management techniques, I wanted to back up a little bit and start at the beginning. First, start a little bit about what is stress, and then we'll move into what actually is happening to our bodies biologically when we're stressed, and then we'll wrap it up with talking about some management techniques. So starting with the definition of stress, just so we're all on the same page here. So stress is a physical, mental, or emotional factor that causes bodily and or mental tension. So that is a definition that I like to use. And it's important when we're thinking about this to realize that everyone experiences stress from time to time. So you're not alone out there, for those of you that said a little or a lot. And it's important to know that there's different types of stress. In addition to those financial stressors that you all shared, you could be faced with an environmental stressor. So an example of that would be a stimuli in the environment that causes stress, like extreme temperatures or crowds or noise. You could be facing a social stressor. So an example of that would be a self-conscious emotion like shame or embarrassment. Stressors can also be internal. Sometimes we forget about these, and that is when your body goes through an illness or potentially undergoes a medical procedure. So, we've realized there's a lot of different types of stressors, including financial stressors. And another piece to cover is this third bullet here on the slide, is that not all stress is negative. So for the example I have up here is, a stress that comes from planning a happy event, such as a wedding. But the key here is for us to first look at the biological process that's actually happening to us when stress occurs, because it's the exact same process biologically, whether our stress is a result of something positive, like the wedding, or something negative, like a natural disaster. Okay, so let's look at this biological process and how stress actually impacts our bodies. So when we're faced with a stressor, our body's fight or flight response kicks in. And I'm sure many of you have heard this before. But just to recap and to sort of explain how this works. So I'm going to use an example here. So imagine you're walking in a forest and you see a bear. Since the bear is a stressor, immediately your brain and body's stress response system, or your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, kicks in. So when you see this bear, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal glands that say, release your stress hormones. So release the adrenaline, release the cortisol. And so when your body releases these hormones, many biological things start to happen. And these are things, they're pretty amazing. These are things that we as humans have evolved to do over thousands of years to survive in the face of stress. So your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, your muscles tense, your brain actually starts to use more oxygen and increases its activity. And at that point, you're standing there, still imagining you're in the forest, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. So this fight or flight process is fantastic in the short term, or I suppose if you happen to be in a forest and you see a bear. But in the short term, this biological process can be extremely beneficial because we can use this process to help motivate us. It can help us concentrate. Let's say, you're interviewing for a new job or you have a presentation to give. And so that fight or flight can actually be super helpful in the short term. But the problem is when you're in chronic stress. And this system, this fight or flight system, is activated over and over and over again. And if you don't have the skills to manage or lessen your stress, this is when this adaptive process can become very, very health damaging for us. And this is really the reason why it's important to not only identify our stressors like we were doing a minute ago, but to manage them so we don't remain in that fight or flight response system for too long, having that stress response system being activated. Okay, so before talking about the coping strategies that I wanted to share with you all, it's important to talk about measuring stress. And you might be thinking, well, I know I experience some stress, but how do I know what the difference is between a little and a lot? And is there a way to sort of measure my stress day to day? And yes, there is. There's numerous tools out there. There are numerous tools. And the one that I have up on the screen for you today is called the Perceived Stress Scale. And this one was actually created a while ago in 1983 by a group of psychologists, but it's still today the most widely used psychological instrument for measuring the perception of one's stress. And so I encourage you all to take a look at this. I have shared the link with Joel and Carrie, and so it's up on the Solid Finances site, a PDF page where you can read more about the creation of this scale. You can learn how to score it. There are some positive questions in this list of 10, some more negative questions, and so with the positive ones you'll actually inverse the scoring mechanism. But you can read all about this on your own time, but I just wanted to share with you one way where you can say, okay, I'm going to utilize this and measure my stress from time to time to see actually, quantitatively how stressed am I. All right, so now's the fun part. So we've identified what stress is. We've talked about what stress does biologically to our bodies. And now I wanted to share with you 10 effective coping or management tools, as Joel mentioned, that we all can use in the short term, even when focusing on some longer term, whether it be financial goal or otherwise. So the first one is to focus on eating healthy and balanced meals. So this might not actually be the first thing you think about when you're stressed. Often when we're stressed, we turn to comfort foods, and oftentimes these comfort foods are high in sugar and trans fats. But it's important, and I think this is why I like to start with the biological piece, because it's important to see how these strategies are actually helping to counter what's happening biologically when you're stressed. So if your body's been stressed for a while, it can get really used to having too much cortisol in the blood. And this can actually open the door for inflammation. Stress also decreases the body's lymphocytes, which are our body's white blood cells that help us to fight off infection. So to counteract this, one suggestion, and when I say incorporate healthy, well-balanced meals, is when you're feeling stressed to actually, instead of going right to those comfort foods, to incorporate more anti-inflammatory foods like leafy greens and foods really high in vitamin C like citrus, especially in times of stress. And one thing I want to mention, as we go through all 10 of these, is the stressors that will come to you. I mean, those are inevitable. We're all going to face stressors, coming at us every day. But what we can control is our ability to cope with these stressors. And so hopefully you'll find one or more, in these list of 10 coping strategies that will work for you. All right, so we talked about the diet overall, and really what stress does to our inflammation system and our infectious ability to fight infections. But the second thing is a very tangible thing. So minimize caffeine consumption. So, I too love my cup of coffee or two in the morning, but how much coffee is too much? And I think it's important to realize what coffee is actually doing to your body. And then again, think about, what happens to your body when you're at that fight or flight and experiencing chronic stress. So when you consume caffeine, you're actually injecting more adrenaline, a stress hormone, back into your system. And once you've hit certain amounts, you can actually increase your body's level of cortisol with too much caffeine. So if you think about it, if you're stressed out, if your stress response is activated and you're trying to lessen those stress hormones, especially if you say, oh, I have a lot to do and that's why I'm stressed, so I'm going to drink some coffee to help me get, these tasks done easier, you're actually not helping the stress response system by ingesting, copious amounts of caffeine. So even small reductions there will help you to reverse that fight or flight response and kind of bring that more down to normal. So your question might be, well, how much coffee is too much? And so the rule of thumb is about 400 milligrams per day, and that's about 20 ounces of drip coffee. It's actually about 5 shots of espresso. But I have posted a link to the Solid Finances site where you can input your weight, because of course this is weight dependent, and you can see exactly how much caffeine you should have. And then really, I'd encourage you in times of stress, more stress than normal, to try to minimize the caffeine intake, while focusing on the anti-inflammatory foods and the foods high in vitamin C. All right, so moving on to this poll, I'm just curious, based on the information that I just shared with you all, are you drinking too much caffeine? All right, so I think that's everybody. So we have 60% said yes, you are drinking too much caffeine. So, I mean, it's just good to be aware of that and to also understand the relationship between, what caffeine does to your body and how this relates to your body's natural reaction to a stressful event. All right, so moving on to my coping strategies 3 and 4. All right, so number 3 is incorporating exercise or more exercise. And this is actually one of my favorite coping mechanisms because exercise reduces the level of your body's stress hormones. So here with exercise, you're actually counteracting the biological impacts of stress. And there's an added benefit. Exercise also stimulates the production of endorphins, so the chemicals in your brain that are your body's natural painkillers and mood elevators. And so here, just knowing that, if you're feeling those signs of stress, and you can tell that that system's been activated with exercise, that's an automatic thing that you can do to counteract those biological impacts. And here on the screen I have how much exercise you should be getting. So how much exercise we as Americans should be getting comes from Health and Human Services and the CDC. They come out with guidelines, and they've actually recently updated their guidelines in 2018. And so I've shared a few bullet points with you from those new recommendations. And so the first bullet is 150 minutes to 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity, or 75 minutes to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity, or really any combination of those two things. So if you're not getting at least the recommended, I'd encourage you to increase that. But also strategically, if you know you will have a stressful day coming up or a stressful morning, to try to plan some of that exercise around those stressful events, because it will naturally reduce a lot of your body's stress hormones. Another piece that was added to the 2018 guidelines that wasn't in the previous ones that came out in 2008 was to add muscle strengthening activities 2 or more days a week that involve all major muscle groups. So that's another kind of piece that is recommended by HHS and CDC to add to your daily routines, your weekly routine. And if you're interested, what is exact moderate intensity or what is vigorous intensity or what are the differences, I also posted on the Solid Finances site the actual guidelines. And if you're curious, it breaks it up for children, for adults, for older adults, and so you can browse through those and see, okay, are you getting the recommended, and what are some strategies in there to add that to your weekly routine as a stress reducer. All right, so number 4 is sleep. This is really, really important as a coping strategy or a stress management technique. So remember a few minutes ago we talked about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal fight or flight response. So prolonged time in this response, so when you are chronically stressed, not only impacts how long you sleep, but the quality of your sleep. It actually impacts the amount of time you spend in that REM cycle of sleep, which normally occurs, right around 90 minutes after you fall asleep. And this can lead to a variety of adverse health outcomes like impaired memory, poor mood regulation, and weight gain. So imagine you're stressed, then you're not getting good sleep, and then you wake up and you have these things happen that are, further funneling you into another cycle of stress. And so how do you kind of get out of this? And one strategy is to ensure or really work on your getting enough sleep. And, this can be hard, especially when you are stressed and, those stress hormones are elevated because you're activated, right? You're in that fight or flight response, and it's, really hard to turn that off. So before I give suggestions about, how we can ensure that our sleep is not only longer but more quality, here I have updated sleep guidelines as well. And so here I've wanted to share with you all, by age range, so teenagers, younger adults, adults, and older adults. And you'll see that some of these have actually changed with the new guidelines. So for teenagers, for example, there used to be a shorter hour of sufficient sleep. It's widened to 8 to 10 hours. Adults, so 26 to 64, that didn't change and remains at 7 to 9 hours a night. So hopefully you are getting something in that range. But how do you ensure that your sleep can be better even when under stress? And that is tricky. So I have two strategies here that I like to use or try to use. And so the first one is to put away electronics, whether that be a phone, a tablet, or watching TV at least an hour before you want to fall asleep. And the reason for this is the blue light in these devices, in electronic devices, actually delays your body's internal clock. So, when you think about your circadian rhythm and how, we want to wake up at a certain time and sleep at a certain time, the blue light, when you're looking at these electronics, tells your body that it's not ready to go to sleep, and it essentially, what it does is it suppresses the release of your sleep hormone and your sleep-inducing hormone, melatonin. So that's why, if you're having a hard time falling asleep anyway because you're stressed, because you're more in that fight or flight, and then you're relying on electronics or, doing that before bed, you sort of have two things going on. One is the stress hormone, and two is that delayed activation of melatonin. So putting away your electronics is a really, really easy strategy, 1 or even 2 to 3 hours before bedtime to ensure that, your body's producing the melatonin, which will make it a lot more easy to fall asleep. The second strategy is to try and follow a regular sleep cycle. And this can get hard, especially on weekends when typically, our day-to-day activities change dramatically from during the week to the weekend. But this, again, if you are going to sleep and waking up at the same time every single day, that's going to help your body not only get in, but stay in to its circadian rhythm, which can really aid in long-term sleep quality. And again, the reason the sleep quality is important is memory, mood, those types of things. So I actually have two poll questions. So here's the first one, and I don't know if there's a way to do the next one at the same time, but we'll do this one first. So the first one is, are you getting enough sleep per night? All right, so we're split 60-40. 60% says yes and 40% says no. And again, it's important to know how many hours that is if you're in that age range, 7 to 9. And now the second poll question is, are you going to bed and waking up at roughly the same time every day, including weekends? All right, so that's actually really positive. So we have 80% saying yes. And this is just something to keep in mind. It will certainly help not only how long you're sleeping, but the sleep quality, which is really, really important when trying to manage stress, especially when it becomes chronic and seemingly hard to get out of those stress cycles. All right, so the fifth management strategy I wanted to share is becoming more and more popular, and there are a lot of different tools out there. I'm sharing one tool with you, and again, I've shared where this stress diary template comes from on the Solid Finances website, but this tool is to start writing a stress diary. And what this is is, you can see here on the template that I've shared, this is a tool that can help you identify your stress. So here you see you log like you would in a diary. So you log the date and time, the most recent stressful event that you experienced at that time when you're using your stress diary. Then you, subjectively scale your happiness on a scale from 0 to 10. You report on your current mood, how effectively you're working, how productive you are at that minute. And then you note the fundamental cause of the stressor. So if you look at this example, the first example is the boss, and the stressful event was the boss canceled a scheduled meeting. Then you mark your stress level, your physical symptoms, and how well you handled the stressful event. And so these can be really wonderful tools, especially at the beginning when you haven't spent a lot of time figuring out what events in your life, whether they be financial or whether they be social or whether, they're due to something entirely different. And here you can see, okay, what is the cause of your stress? What is the level of pressure at which you work best? Because again, at the very beginning, we talked about how short-term stress can actually be positive, right? That fight or flight response for the short term can help you with concentration. It can help improve your memory, can actually even help improve your immune function, but we don't want that stress to become chronic. And this can help you log and identify, again, causes of your stress, the level of pressure at which you work best, and can help you improve the way you manage stress. And so if you're interested in this coping strategy, this management tool, if you look on the link that I shared with you all, you can see kind of what it means. For example, how happy do you feel? You see 2 6s on the slides and a 5. So what's the difference between a 5 and a 6? If you go to that site that I shared, it really outlines what these different subjective levels mean, and it'll help you identify your different levels. All right, so moving along, so I've paired these two together on purpose. These are two that I found extremely effective and rather easy to incorporate. Some of the earlier ones I talked about, can be a little bit more difficult. These two, I think, are easier to incorporate if you don't do these already. So the first one is to plan to spend a few. You don't need a lot of time here. And oftentimes people tell me, oh, I don't have, time to spend alone time every day. But really the research shows all you really need is 5 to 10 minutes alone every day. And what this does is, even just temporarily, suspends conversation, allows you to reflect on your day, the things that have been going well, the things that have potentially not been going so well. And this allows you to reset. You can really focus on your breathing, try to not focus on any of those stressors. And even those tiny bit of minutes, research has shown can help you kind of come back from that fight or flight response system and kind of calm down and be ready for the next stressor, if you will, but help you better kind of manage and get through that. So 3 things that, I like to do: go for a walk, even if it's 10 minutes, at any point in the day if something stressful has happened. Try to incorporate mindfulness. There's numerous breathing exercises out there. I've posted some to the Solid Finances website as well. A lot of these are guided, so even if you have never done that before and don't really know how to start or what to do, you can take your 5 minutes, put it in your calendar, do a 5-minute breathing exercise, and I guarantee you automatically you'll start to feel the biological benefits of doing that. Reading a book for fun, really any of these things. If you can find times throughout your day, one 5 to 10 minute chunk is fine, but the more times you can find, the better, will certainly help. The 7th one is setting short-term goals, and not only that, but rewarding yourself for reaching them. And I think especially when we're talking about some things that could seem very long-term, like a financial goal, what are some short-term goals that you could potentially reach along the way? Like, what are some short-term milestones? And a lot of evidence is pointing to, not only reaching them, but rewarding yourself for reaching them. And those rewards can come in numerous forms. But I wanted to ask, before we go any further, a poll question. For those of you that incorporate the short-term reward method as a stress reducer, maybe you do this without even really realizing the impact it has on your stress, what types of rewards do you use? If anyone would care to share. All right, so we've had two answers come in. Oh, a few more. So one, I love the sense of accomplishment is enough of a reward. And if that works for you, that's fabulous. I mean, I think a lot of these coping strategies, you know, they're general, and figuring out how you can tailor that to yourself is wonderful. We have some tangible things. We have ice cream. We have a new book. And so, I mean, just being mindful and cognizant of, you know, what's happening in the short term that's positive can really help you eliminate some of the more longer term feelings of chronic stress. All right. So the last three that I have together, again, I've grouped these on purpose. So number 8 is learning to say no, especially if you're noticing that you're experiencing, you know, that chronic, longer lasting stress. Learning to say no is extremely powerful, but often a lot harder than it seems. And so I encourage you all, you know, right now as you're sitting there listening, to think of, you know, one thing in your life, whether that be work related or family related or community engagement related, that maybe saying no to it is going to have a lot more benefits in terms of managing your stress level than saying yes. Oftentimes we have the tendency right away to say, yes, I can do this, yes, I can be that person, yes, I can volunteer, yes, I can help out, yes, I can chair that committee. And then it gets to a point where your stress has reached such high levels, and maybe some of these things that you're thinking about right now have nothing to do with the financial piece of your life. But omitting or reducing as many other stressors as you can, you know, will also give you a more positive mindset to focus on the financial piece. So learning to say no is a great technique that really has been proven very beneficial to minimizing those impacts of stress and to not heightening it. So I'm going to ask a poll question, and then we're going to come back to this slide. So I'm curious from all of you, what is the last thing you said no to that helped to reduce your stress level? Ooh, we've got a lot of things coming in. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Okay, so we have a new project with a coworker, an education board, an adult's friend's birthday party, a new grant project, applying to be a board member. So lots of great examples, and I think just getting into the mind, like saying no to something, like the 5 responses that you all just sent in, seeing that as a positive tool to help you lower your stress so that you can be in a better mindset to do your work, to, you know, be engaged with your family, to be engaged in your community, is a great thing, and not feeling guilty or shameful or adding some of those internal stressors back onto you by saying no. So again, it's sort of that reversal in your mindset about why you're saying no, and not letting that no response further fuel internal stressors. You know, because then instead of using that as a coping mechanism, your guilt of it is then sending you back into that stress cycle. So I'm going to back up here. Okay, and Number 9, so this is another, all of these 3 things I put on the same slide because they're all more about sort of mindset, type coping strategies rather than some of the first ones that were making conscious food choices or, exercise or the sleep strategy. These are a lot more, let's say, cognitive strategies that will help you mitigate the effects of stress. So number 9 is to accept events you can't control. So again, this sounds really easy. All these 3 on this slide sound really easy, but in fact, they're quite hard to actually implement in your daily life. So I have found that the best way to do this, it's really easy to say that. Okay, I'm going to accept everything I can't control. Easy, I'm done. That sometimes doesn't work because we don't actually know what those things are. And so I would encourage that if this is one of the 10 pieces that you want to try to mindfully incorporate or to try to work on, to chart out, so really just getting out a sheet of paper and putting 2 columns in the top heading and chart out what the stressors are that you currently have in your life. So some of you shared some of those earlier in the hour with Joel. Chart out what stressors you have in your life and put them into 2 columns. So column 1 are the things that you have no control over. Interest rates. Unless you're sitting on the Federal Reserve Board, you have absolutely no control over those. So put those on the one side, and then put the things you can control on the other side. What are your stressors that you have control over? And when you see everything written out, I guarantee you it will be a lot easier to accept everything in that first column if you see them in a line or in a row, rather than just very abstractly saying to yourself, I'm going to accept the things I can't control. So that's a great strategy for that one. And then really folding that sheet of paper, in half, and then you just have the stressors in your control that you can then use these coping strategies to mitigate the effects. All right, so the last one, I love this one, but again, it's really, it sounds simple, but it's really tricky to actually carry out in real life. But accept that things don't have to be perfect. Good enough is sometimes just fine. So again, another cognitive shift, if you will, but more and more we are striving for perfection and setting these goals and trying to reach, this end goal that we deem needs to be perfect, and that can cause us a lot of stress. I recently gave a talk at a local high school, and nearly every hand went up when I asked the students about them being stressed, and a lot of them were saying that they didn't have perfect grades and they didn't have perfect relationships, and so many times the word perfect was mentioned. And so just giving yourself a little bit of grace that ideal of perfect oftentimes is unachievable. We define that in whatever way we're defining it, and good enough is sometimes just fine. And especially in times of chronic stress, financial stress, sort of these bigger external things, going at it with this mindset, I think, can be really, really beneficial. All right, so I am going to go past this poll question G because we already did it, and I'm going to go to this last one. So take some time with this. We only have 2 more slides, but of the 10 coping strategies, I want each person to select, and I don't think this will allow us to select 2. So of the 10 coping strategies, which one are you willing to try to help you manage your stress? Oh, Joel is saying we can do more than 1. So if everybody could pick 2 that will work for you, work in your life, that you're willing to try, let's wait a minute, and yeah, if everybody could pick 2 events or 2 coping strategies they're willing to try to help manage your stress. So next time you're faced with a stressor, or notice that fight or flight response staying activated. All right, so it looks like I did not convince anybody to choose exercise, but that's all right. every other one was chosen, and this is why I tried to pick 10 that were quite varied because oh, I think the results are gone. Is there a way to see the results again? There we go. Perfect. So it looks like we had the most people choosing accepting events you cannot control, and the second one was learning to say no. So two of the last ones, and then we had an equal responses to incorporating healthy, well-balanced meals, the caffeine, minimizing the caffeine, the sleep. Spending some alone time, the short-term goals, and accepting things don't have to be perfect. So I really encourage you for the two things that you chose today to try them, and even write a little note and keep it in your bag or keep it on your desk or keep it at home. And when you wake up in the morning, just be mindful that those were the two you chose. And if those work for a while and those become habitual, maybe you come back to this and you choose two more in a month's time. And hopefully, as months go on, all 10 of these will start to become natural and start to become seemingly easy ways that you can take a really stressful situation, even something you can't control, that's going to have some impacts, and to help you to start managing that better and feeling better about, next time a stressor comes your way. All right, well, with that, I want to say thank you, and I want to draw our attention to the summary slide just to wrap up a few 4 points that I want everyone to walk away with. So again, our bodies are really, really good at handling episodes of short-term acute stress. If we look at evolution, how humans evolved, we are designed to recover quickly. It's a pretty awesome biological adaptation that those stress hormones allow us to do all those things, right? Back to the bear example. And so that's a great adaptation, but the problem is when that becomes chronic and we can no longer get ourselves out of that fight or flight response. We can't get ourselves kind of back down to normal. Chronic stress has been proven, there is a lot of research out there, to have very harmful effects on our health. Everything from, increasing risk of chronic disease, increasing risk of infection to infectious disease, all sorts of adverse health outcomes can come from experiencing chronic stress. Though the good news is, and I hope that over the last few minutes, this is positive. There's numerous effective coping strategies. Every single strategy I shared with you all today has a lot of research behind it that you can have agency to help you incorporate those to help manage your stress. And it's really just up to you to find a few that work. And it sounds like everybody has already picked two. So I encourage you to use those and to review the resources that I put up on the Solid Finance website. And with that, I will take any questions that any of you might have.
All right, and while folks are thinking of a question, if you would take a moment and help us with a quick evaluation, then we'll go back to the other screen and we'll be able to take any questions that you might have or comments about today's presentation. All right, we'll give folks about maybe 30 more seconds and then we'll switch back to that other screen. But we do certainly appreciate these feedbacks, since we can't obviously visit with you in the back of the room after the session. This is our opportunity to hear a little bit from you. All right. Well, while people are thinking of possible questions. I'll just remind you of the upcoming schedule. First of all, we do have a date changed. We moved a late February session to March 25th. So we will not be back until 4 weeks from today on March 4th, and we'll start a series of 3 sessions dealing with estate planning in some sense, all with Dr. Marcia Getting, who's been a regular presenter in this series in the past. So please update your calendars if you had these marked in the past. March 4th will be the next one, March 11th, and then March 25th. So not seeing any questions have come in so far. Michelle, did you have any final questions or comments you wanted to share?
Sure. I mean, I did. We have one from Carrie, so I'm happy to answer that. So, what, in my opinion, what's the most effective coping strategy of the 10 that I mentioned, and what do I use? I would say off the bat, I use the exercise one. So the one that wasn't chosen by anyone. Just because even 10 minutes of exercise, we know biologically that can actually reverse the effects of stress, and that happens so quickly. So that's the one I use, and also am a big proponent of mindfulness and breathing exercises. Try to do that at least once a day. Guided breathing exercises, certainly before something that I know, an event, a work event or a social event that I know, might bring a little bit of added stress. So I appreciate that question. And if there's anything else that you'd like to ask about, evidence or any other stress management tools, feel free to send me an email or give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk more with you about that later.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Also, thanks for presenting today in general. This is an area I think that we've done a lot of things a number of different times and ways in solid finances, and this is an area that we hadn't been able to address in the past, where to give people some tools while they're maybe working on minimizing financial stress down the road. So with that, thank you all for joining us today, and I certainly hope you'll mark your calendars and join us again on March 4th. With that, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you in March.